When my wife told me she was pregnant, I expected joy, nerves, excitement, maybe even a little chaos. What I didn't expect was to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. Almost overnight, she became distant. Not subtly either. She stopped inviting me to her doctor's appointments. She told me ultrasounds were her thing. If I reached toward her belly, she would gently, but firmly, move my hand away. At first, I told myself she was just overwhelmed. Pregnancy is intense. Hormones are wild. I tried to be patient. But weeks turned into months, and the distance didn't fade. It hardened. I couldn't feel the baby kick. I couldn't talk to her belly. I wasn't allowed to participate in anything that made the pregnancy feel real. It was like the baby existed behind a locked door, and I wasn't allowed inside. Eventually, her therapist suggested a possible explanation. I have a 5-year-old daughter, Leah, from a previous relationship. According to the therapist, my wife might be feeling resentment, not toward Leah specifically, but toward the fact that this wasn't my first child. That the experience wasn't new for me in the same way it was for her. I wanted to believe that once it was said out loud, things would get better. Instead, everything got worse. At our baby shower, in front of friends and family, she interrupted the celebration to announce that this would not be my first child. She told everyone that if they noticed her pulling away from me, they shouldn't ask questions because it might trigger her. People laughed awkwardly. I stood there, frozen, trying to understand how we got here. Home, it was worse. Any time I mentioned her bump, she'd make comments comparing herself to my ex. How my ex's belly was probably bigger, how I'd already done all this before. How I was pretending to care. She refused to call me the baby's father. Once, I overheard her refer to me as a donor while talking to her mother. If we went out in public, she wore baggy clothes. If she noticed me entering a room, she'd pull her shirt down to hide her belly. Felt intentional, like she was protecting something from me. One night, she sat on my lap without thinking, and for the first time, her belly was right there. No barrier. I placed my hands gently on it and told her she was beautiful. I told her how incredible she already was as a mom to Leah. I told her I couldn't wait for our family to grow. I spoke softly to the baby. I said I loved them already. She pulled away like she'd been burned. She accused me of comparing her to my ex. Of reliving moments I'd already had. She told me I didn't have to pretend to care because I'd already experienced all of this before. I tried to explain that this was different. That Leah is special, but this baby is new, unique, ours. She left the room crying, and I stood there wondering how loving someone could hurt this much. The confusing part. Outside of anything pregnancy-related, our marriage looked normal. She was affectionate. She initiated intimacy. She told people I was a great husband. We went on dates. We talked about the future. As long as I didn't mention the baby, everything was fine. Then I snapped. During a break at work, I went to a baby store and bought items she'd saved on her nursery Pinterest board. I came home with flowers, her favorite food, and a prenatal massage certificate. She thanked me, hugged me, even smiled. When I returned later that evening, everything was gone. She told me she'd returned the items to buy things for Leah instead, so Leah wouldn't feel left out. Broke. I cried for the first time in our marriage. I said things I can never take back. I said having a child with her was the worst mistake of my life. I said at least my unfaithful ex had let me bond with my unborn child. I said I didn't care about this baby, only because I knew it would hurt her the way she had hurt me. She looked at me and said quietly, "I know you don't care about the baby, but I'll die before you take my child from me." That was the moment I realized how badly we had both lost control. I left that night and checked into an Airbnb, terrified of what we had become, and even more terrified of what she might reveal next. I thought space would calm things down, but one phone call the next day would force me to confront the truth, and what my wife had been hiding all along. The night I left the house, I told myself I was doing the right thing. Space would protect her, protect the baby, and keep me from saying something unforgivable again. Still, the silence of the Airbnb felt louder than any argument we'd had. Barely slept. My mind replayed everything. Her coldness, my explosion, the look in her eyes when she said she'd never let me take her baby. By morning I knew I couldn't keep running. Avoiding the problem hadn't fixed anything yet. After a couple of drinks and a lot of stewing, I called my father-in-law. We're close. He's old school, married for decades, steady in a way I've always respected. I didn't give details, but he already knew something was wrong. After all, I wasn't living in my own house anymore. He asked me a simple question. What do you have to lose by forcing a real conversation? I told him I was afraid of pushing her further away. He didn't sugarcoat his response. I was already separated from my pregnant wife, panicking about divorce and sleeping alone. According to him, avoidance wasn't protecting anything. It was just delaying the inevitable. Be a man, he said gently. Go home. Lay it all out. The next day, her parents took Leah overnight so we could talk without distractions. I went home with flowers and groceries, ready to cook dinner like nothing had shattered. My wife looked confused when I walked in and asked what I was doing there. I live here, I said. And we need to talk. I started with a long apology. No excuses, no justification. I owned my words, my anger, my cruelty. When I finished, I told her it was her turn. She tried to say nothing was wrong. That hurt more than anything else. I told her my heart was broken, that we had fought for each other through real struggles, and now she was sitting across from me pretending everything was fine while I fell apart. She didn't argue. She just cried. For nearly half an hour, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered that she was afraid our relationship wouldn't survive if she told me the truth. I promised to listen no matter what. And then, for the first time since she got pregnant, she stopped running. What she confessed next rewrote everything I thought I knew about her distance, and about the fears she had been carrying alone. She told me the truth slowly, like she was afraid the words themselves might break something. This baby was her first, but not mine. She hadn't expected that to matter. She thought love would override it. Instead, once she became pregnant, the insecurity took over. At night, she lay awake imagining a version of my life where my ex had stayed, where Leah's family was still intact, and where she didn't exist at all. Every time I got emotional about the baby or treated her lovingly, her mind betrayed her, dragging her back to memories that weren't even hers. Early in her pregnancy, she'd told a close friend she couldn't wait to have a baby with her soulmate. That friend had laughed and said soulmates didn't come with exes or children, that soulmates were meant only for each other. The comment lodged deep. She asked me if I thought we were soulmates. I said yes without hesitation, but by then the damage was done. She began seeing herself and our baby as a second attempt, a replacement for the family she thought I really wanted. She admitted she'd stalked my ex's social media and compared their pregnancies. Bodies, bellies, smiles. She feared our baby would never measure up to Leah in my heart. She worried constantly about what-ifs. What if the baby was disabled? What if they didn't share our interests? What if Leah and the baby didn't bond? Worst of all, she'd read countless articles and posts claiming fathers bonded less with their second children. That they cared deeply but differently, less intensely. She believed I'd already experienced the magic. And she was terrified she'd never be special. She confessed thoughts that scared her. Thoughts she hated herself for having. Moments where she wished Leah didn't exist, not because she didn't love her, but because it would make everything simpler. She knew those thoughts were wrong, and that knowledge filled her with shame. She pulled away from me not because she didn't want me, but because she was afraid I'd confirm her worst fears if she let me in. By the time she finished, we were both crying. Just when I thought I understood her pain, she revealed how deeply her fears had shaped every moment of our pregnancy, and how close she came to losing herself in them. She explained how the guilt never stopped. She wanted me to spend time with Leah so Leah wouldn't feel replaced, but when I did, my wife felt invisible. When I focused on her and the baby, she felt like she was stealing something from Leah. There was no winning scenario in her head. At the zoo, when her pregnancy forced us to leave early, she cried on the way home. Not from pain but from fear. Fear that Leah would resent her. Fear that I'd secretly be angry about losing that time with my daughter. She told me about small moments that haunted her. One evening, she asked us to read stories together, one chosen by Leah, one she loved from her own childhood for the baby. The next day, while I was at work, Leah tore pages from the book my wife chose. She wanted to tell me, but her friend convinced her I'd think she was lying or trying to create division, so she stayed silent. Her silence turned into distance. Distance turned into resentment. And resentment turned into self-loathing. By the time I noticed something was truly wrong and suggested therapy, she already felt trapped by her own behavior. Admitting the truth meant admitting she'd sabotaged her own first pregnancy. That realization broke her. I apologized for not pushing sooner, for accepting her dismissal, for not protecting our relationship when she needed help most. We cried together until there was nothing left to say. Then she placed my hand on her belly and whispered, "You can feel the baby now." That moment shattered me in the best way. What happened next didn't just change our marriage. It marked the beginning of healing neither of us thought was possible. From that night on, everything shifted. She woke me the next morning whispering, "The baby wants blueberry pancakes." I don't think I've ever moved faster in my life. She let me help when she was sick. Let me hold her belly. Let me talk to the baby. I learned her quiet cues, how she leaned into me, how lifting her belly eased her back pain, how rubbing her feet could calm her tears. Some moments still hurt. We couldn't get back the months we lost. But we started making new firsts. At a pool party, she asked me to choose her swimsuit, something she never would have done before. On the way home, she guided my hand to her belly and laughed as the baby hiccuped. It was the first moment like that we shared together. I worked to ease her guilt in small, tangible ways. I bought a pull-behind bike trailer so she could still join us on rides. I took time off work to be more present. We all stayed in therapy. Leah's therapist reassured us that she was securely attached and thriving. Her only complaint about my wife: delayed candy delivery. For the first time in months, my wife breathed easier. As the due date crept closer, I realized something powerful. Healing didn't erase the past, but it gave us a future worth fighting for. We're close to meeting our baby now. My wife still needs reassurance. Sometimes she brings up my ex, and I've learned how to respond, by redirecting us back to our firsts. Our first home. Our first vacation. Our first kiss. The moments that made me choose her. I remind her that she is not a replacement. She is the family I chose. Saying her fears out loud took away their power. She's working through them in therapy, learning to forgive herself for thoughts that came from fear, not malice. I wish I had stood up sooner. I wish I'd realized that love sometimes looks like insisting on honesty when silence feels safer. But we're here now, together, healing, preparing for a future that almost slipped through our fingers. And this time we're choosing each other, with open eyes and open hearts. Sometimes the darkest moments don't end a marriage. They expose exactly what needs to be healed before love can grow stronger than ever.